How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bushradical. On the 27th of January of this month, I will have been doing YouTube for 6 years. And one of the questions that I've been asked over and over and over is, what is my E.D.C? And I never thought I'd actually have to answer this question, but I've got it 1,000 times. You know, when I started doing YouTube videos back in 2017, bushcraft was huge. The whole survival industry, I suppose, was huge. Everybody on YouTube that was into that, they were doing stuff about bug out bag, a ton of E.D.C videos, and I just never was into that. I'm not that prepared, to be honest. You know, they'd say, this is my go bag for 2019 and these are the things that I carry in it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I totally understand the concept. I just always been too scatterbrained to have everything I need together at one time. So the whole E.D.C thing was never my cup of tea, right? But I've got that question again and again and again and again for 6 years. So today I'm going to show you what my E.D.C is, everyday carry, and I hope you get something from it. Stay tuned. So here's what's in my pocket on a daily basis. That's what I carry every single day, no matter where I'm at. Now, the fact that everything I have here is yellow is just kind of a coincidence. I always carry a pocket knife, and I like the smaller pocket knives, and I generally use the smaller blade on the smaller pocket knife. This is an Imperial brand. It's made in the United States. It's got a real cheap exterior, but the steel that the blades are made out of is really good steel. It sharpens easy, holds an edge pretty good. I don't think I've ever paid more than $6 for one of these things, and I have several of them. I have a whole box of pocket knives, and I bought every single one of them at garage sales or flea markets, especially flea markets. And I don't think I've paid more than $8 for any one of these knives. I've got knives that are too big, that I don't want in my pocket, and then I've got knives that are really comfortable to carry. And the big ones really never get carried. And the smaller ones, I swap those out when they get dull. If I'm carrying a knife for a week or two and it just gets too dull to be useful, I throw it back in the drawer and then I just grab a fresh one. And about once a year, I'll take them all out to the garage and I'll sharpen every one of them, put them back in the box. And then those big ones, I just like to have them. They're just kind of nice. You know, if I find a good deal on a quality knife for a couple dollars, I pretty much always buy it. If I run into somebody that doesn't have a knife, you know, I'm happy to give them a knife. But I probably have $50 into having 30 knives or so. To be totally honest, I never used to carry a pocket knife because I didn't like it in my pocket. But my father-in-law, Mick Bellinger, he showed me his knife one day that he carried, and he had this little tiny tin-covered Imperial, kind of like the one I just showed you. But it didn't have a colored scale around the outside. It was just tin colored, and it was small. And he said, man, I just love carrying this type of knife because you don't even know it's in your pocket. And that kind of changed the way I looked at knives after that, because I had plenty of knives, but I never really carried a pocket knife. And so I started really focusing on picking up small pocket knives. When they're in your pocket, you don't even know they're there because they're small. And you generally never need any more than just a little tiny blade like that. And that brings me to my second E.D.C. A small Bic lighter. I like yellow because it's easy to find. Orange is good too. Just like with the pocket knife, I like the small mini lighters a lot better than the full size. I honestly don't want this in my pocket. It's just too big. You can see that there's a massive difference in size. Now, one thing I do with all my lighters, I get rid of this stupid child-proof spring. You just pry off this tin collar, and you can see that spring. Once you get that collar off, you can just bend this thing and just pull it right out of there. Then you take the collar, bend it back so it's maybe even overbent, so it's a little narrower than it was before. And you take and just kind of force it back in place until it snaps back into place. And it's much, much easier to work. Now, what got me started carrying a lighter is I fell in a river back in, I don't know, 2000. It was a warm day, 70, 80 degrees. We're floating a section of river we hadn't been on, north of Fairbanks, Alaska, the Chena River, out towards Chena Hot Springs. Me and another guy in the canoe, we flipped the canoe an hour into the trip. It was supposed to be a 3-hour trip, and it was a really warm day. All of us were just t-shirts and shorts. We ended up being on the water for about 8 hours because it was a much longer trip than we thought. And by the time we got off that river, I was hypothermic. This is August in Alaska, so it is starting to get quite dark. and it was a kind of an unseasonably warm day, kind of middle to late August. By the time we got off that water, it was in the high 40s probably, and I was freezing to death. And after that, I have never went anywhere without carrying a lighter. All the cabins that you see on this channel, they all have wood stoves. I'm constantly lighting fires, constantly burning papers in the wood stove in the garage. I use this lighter every other day at the very least. I like the yellow because it's easy to see. This is one of the greatest tools ever. Stick it in your pocket, forget it's there. I mean, you can't fly with it, but other than that, you can carry it anywhere you go. Of course, the other thing that I carry every single day, everywhere I go, is a guitar pick. This is pretty much an irrelevant thing to tell you guys I carry because very few of you probably play guitar. Some of you do, obviously, but every video I've ever shot that has music in it is music that I've recorded, and I'm always buying and selling instruments, so I always have guitar picks in my pocket. So I'm going to branch out from what's in my actual pocket, and I'm going to show you guys some other things that you might want to really keep in mind that are good EDCs. Now here's kind of my truck EDC. For starters, some Werther's Originals. Another scarf, because if you keep your neck warm, the rest of you is always going to be much warmer. I always carry an axe in my truck. Now a real legitimate question is, why would I carry an axe in my truck? And the simple answer is, I spend a lot of time in two-track country, and you get on those back roads, especially in the shoulder seasons of the year, and you're very likely to run across the tree that's laying across the road. Now I have a chainsaw that goes in the truck, goes out of the truck, goes in the truck, out of the truck. But if I forget that saw for some reason, I always have an axe in the back of the truck. And if I'm cruising down a two-track on my way to the cabin, I've got my groceries, I'm gonna spend a couple days, and then I run into an 8-inch log across the road, the odds of being able to get that out of the way, you know, you run into a good-sized log that's come down across the road and you don't have a saw with you, you're probably not going to go any farther. So I generally have a chainsaw when I go up north, but I always have an axe. And I've used it lots of times. I've used it in building projects, I've used it chopping stuff out of trails, but I just forget about it. It goes behind the seat, I never think about it. Another thing you're going to find in my truck, you're going to find a nice big heavy tow strap. Now the tow strap is as much for pulling stuff as it is for getting unstuck. Generally, I don't get stuck. I don't really go many places that are questionable. And you know, this truck's it's a 4-wheel drive, so I'm not generally on questionable footing. But I have pulled a couple other people out with my strap, and I've pulled stumps out with the strap. I've pulled trees. You know, it's just a good thing to have. It's a lot easier to pack around than a chain. It does pretty much the same work as a chain. Another thing I always carry, this is just a chunk of a Coleman camping pad. Now you can buy a full-size pad and cut 4 or 5 of these little kneelers out of that pad. But when you're changing a tire, when you're down working on something, especially when the ground is wet, you know, just this dollar chunk of foam, I mean, it's worth its weight in gold. Keeps your knees from getting buggered up. You know, for like 20 years, I was a concrete finisher. I spent a lot of time on my knees finishing concrete. So my knees, they're pretty happy to have a little pad to kneel on. If you're working in wet, if it's rainy out, it keeps you from just getting miserable and soaked. I find that I use this pad for so many things so often that I would hate to be without it. Another thing I carry everywhere I go is I always carry tools. Everything in here is 1/2-inch drive. I have a set of metrics in there, set of SAEs. I've got a 1/2-inch breaker bar. I have 2 ratchets, and then I have a complete set of deep wells. That toolbox generally stays with this truck. You know, this old F-250, it's got a 250,000 miles on it, and every part on this thing is big and beefy. So a 3/8 drive, socket set and ratchet is just out of the question. Now personally for me, I change my own motors, I change my own transmissions, I do all my own automotive work. So where I grew up, I had uncles that lived real close, and my grandpa and grandma lived close, and my dad, you know, I lived with my dad, and everybody in the family worked on their own vehicles. Everybody. And everybody had older stuff, and they kept it on the road by constantly repairing it. And that's still the way I look at it. Like, I never assume that this truck is going to make it to the UP and back. I also know that if I have a problem and I don't have tools with me, I'm dead in the water. I get my phone out and I call for help, and I don't want to do that if I don't have to. Speaking of calling somebody, my cell phone is a hand-me-down from my wife and my daughter. I always get the phone everybody's done using, and this is an iPhone SE. I have talk and text on it. I do not have internet. I don't have data on it because, you know, I got big thumbs and I don't want to surf the net on a phone. Call me old-fashioned, but no internet on my phone. So even if I needed to call somebody, I'd have to call somebody else to look up the number for a tow truck. So I always carry tools with me. If I need to change a belt, if I need to change an alternator, if I need to change, you name it, I want to make sure I have the stuff with me. Another E.D.C item. Absolutely everywhere I go, anywhere I go, I always carry a headlamp. And I always carry the same one. I have probably 3 of these. This is the Rayovac indestructible headlamp. I think I bought these at Home Depot. They're 15 bucks or so, but they literally are indestructible. I've had this headlamp for, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years. It's just beat to death. These are really bright, as opposed to having a really diffused light. They've got a nice spotlight characteristic. I actually like the older ones better. The older ones have like a over the head strap too, but they also, the LED bulb itself is a little different. It's more of a white, like a natural light, and the newer ones are a little more of a yellow to the light. I don't know if that makes sense, but the light quality in the older ones is a little better, the ones that have a strap that goes over the head. But they actually are pretty much indestructible. The batteries don't last the longest. Some of those old Petzls that are super, super dim, you know, they might last a month, but you can't hardly see anything. You know, this is a good, bright spotlight of a headlamp. I just think it's the best one made, but I always carry one. Speaking of which, when I say I always carry one, generally, if I'm going somewhere, I'm carrying it in the car, and I always put it in the same spot. That spot is right there. I always hang my headlamp off the shifter. Right there. And the reason is super simple. A lot of times when I'm going up north or traveling up in Alaska or whatever, I've got the car or the truck just piled with stuff. Sleeping bags and tools and poles and you just name it, right? If it's dark out and your car is absolutely full of stuff and you find all of a sudden that you need the headlamp, you need to find it, even in the dark with your eyes shut, you could just reach up to the shifter lever and you know it's right there. Like if you put your headlamp in a backpack, you always want to put it in the same spot. So even with your eyes shut, you can find it. And if you keep it in a car, which I usually do, I want to know that even with my eyes shut, I can find that headlamp every time really easy. I don't mean to play tricks on you guys. I know a lot of people ask me the question, what's your E.D.C? And they're expecting me to say, I carry a whatever pistol in this holster. And that's just not my thing. This is my E.D.C, and one of the most important things about what I actually carry every day is water. I know this sounds stupid, but a lot of times I'll be sitting at home and I'll be half dehydrated because I'm so used to drinking out of a water bottle. And if I'm on the road for any amount of time, I've got this old canteen. This is made by Miro, the company that makes cookware, and it's 1 gallon. So you got 1 gallon of water here, you got 1 quart of water here. If I'm going anywhere more than 100 miles, I have both of these filled up and then generally an extra jug, and I put them all in the car or the truck. The idea of going somewhere without drinking water, I know a lot of people that do travel without water right at hand, but I can't wrap my head around it. I don't see anything practical at all about not having all the water that you need with you wherever you go. Another thing I carry with me all the time everywhere I go, except right now I don't have it with me, is a pad, a paper, and a pencil, or a pen, because I'm constantly making lists so I can just remember the stuff that I know I'm going to forget. This is definitely a video that I never intended on making, but because I've been asked this question literally thousands of times over the last 6 years, I figured it was time to at least answer those questions. So if you've ever wondered what my E.D.C is, those are the things I have with me everywhere I go, every day. But other than that, that's about as far as I've ever made it with preparations. 9 times out of 10, I just wake up in the morning and I put my stuff together for whatever's going on that day. But if you've ever wondered what I actually do have on me every single day, no matter what, I hope you found this video informative. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Dave Whipple, and you've been watching Bushradical. And be radical, eh? See you soon.